Business, a podcast for all those subjects we've been trained to avoid. Here's your respectfully irreverent host, Keith Shelton.
Well, good evening, everybody. Welcome back. We're so glad to have you joining us tonight in this special edition of our It's Nobody's Business podcast. Just to remind you, this is something that we've done to resurrect an old radio talk show I used to have called State Your Business. And so we can cover topics from current events to news of the day to topics of interest to business people. And in this case, we're talking about news and information that should be interesting to everyone. And so that's what we're going to do tonight. And let me go ahead and introduce my sidekick, my co-pilot, my son, JT Shelton.
What's going on, everybody?
Welcome aboard, bud.
Glad to be here, man.
Well, let me tell y'all, tonight's show, it's not going to be a repeat, but based on cards and letters and comments and text and emails that we received from the podcast we did not last time, but time before last, a lot of people had questions after they had a chance to view the show, and so we thought, boy, you're right, we didn't really cover that all that well, or we covered it, but it's a case of you and I and our special guest. We knew what we were doing, but we didn't do a very good job of making it. Bringing it down to the level of the everyday working fella or lady. And so we thought maybe we might better revisit some of these topics, and we may pick up on some news that's brought forward now a little bit. So tonight our special guest is we're bringing back Jake Mahan. Everybody give Jake Mahan. There he is.
Hey, guys. Thanks for having me back. Glad to be here. Yeah,
our one and only fan.
This is him. My wife told me the first time I came on, my only goal was to not get canceled, and so far, I think I've come away unscathed. So at this point, I think I'm playing with house money. So maybe we can get a little more crazy today.
No death threats, no suspicious packages or anything.
Not yet. We're doing pretty good. I still got a job, and so. I think we're doing good, guys. It definitely could have gone worse.
It could have gone a lot worse.
That's great. I want everybody to understand. Jake is coming to us from his deep underground bunker in an undisclosed location somewhere in the New Mexico mountains. And so, Jake, thanks for joining us tonight.
You bet, guys. Once again, glad to be back. Appreciate it very much. First ever recurring guest, I think, in Nobody's Business podcast. So I'm happy to carry that moniker going forward.
Exactly. Well, look, here's the one thing that we had the most comments about. It was the video we showed of this particular individual who is supposed to be President Biden's number one advisor. He's the chairman of the committee that advises him the most on economic matters. And so just for any of those who are joining us for the first time tonight and didn't get to see it last time, we're gonna let you see it again. And I think we're going to do a better job this time of pointing out just number one, if you know what he's saying and how wrong he is, it's hilarious. But number two, we're going to try to do a better job of explaining to you exactly how far he's missed the target. So, JT, you going to roll the tape?
Yep, I'm pulling it up right here.
Can't hear it.
Sorry, guys. Hang on one second. I got to share it better. There we go.
Nope. Still can't hear.
Well, I don't know what happened there. Let me try to.
Well,
Let's try this one. Usually, I'm the technologically advanced one. How
Well,
about
There we
that?
go.
yeah. Okay, start it over.
There you
so
go.
the U.S. government can't go bankrupt because we can print our own money.
It obviously begs the question, why exactly are we borrowing in a currency that we print ourselves? I'm waiting for someone to stand up and say, why do we borrow our own currency in the first place?
Like you said, they print the dollars. Why does the government even borrow?
Well, again, some of this stuff gets, some of the language, some of the language and concepts are just confusing. I mean, the government definitely prints money, and it definitely lends that money, which is why the government definitely prints money, and then it lends that money by selling bonds. Is that what they do?
Is it?
They sell
Boy,
bonds.
we're in
They sell
good
bonds,
hands.
right? Because they sell bonds and people buy the bonds and lend them the money. Yeah.
Mhm.
So
Mm-hmm.
a lot of times, at least to my ear with MMT, the language and the concepts can be kind of unnecessarily confusing, but there is no question that the government prints money and then it uses that money to yeah, I guess I can't really talk. I don't get it. I don't know what they're talking about. It's like the government clearly prints money. It does it all the time, and it clearly borrows. Otherwise, we wouldn't be having this debt and deficit conversation. So,
Yeah,
I don't think there's anything confusing there.
I don't get it.
I forgot he says I don't get it. That's even better.
That's why we're having this conversation.
Okay, JT, take it back to the beginning of that video so it shows what his title is. All right, stop it right there.
Chair of the Council of Economic Advisors, President Joseph Biden. That's Jared Bernstein.
Oh,
Okay.
Jared.
Jake, we're not going to belabor this point, but my gosh, please explain to everybody how bad. I mean, he didn't even get over the target, let alone miss it. He didn't even get over the target. Help us out, Jake.
Yeah, and of course, the first point being, even if you at home don't understand what it is, you sure hope your economic advisor does. Like I said, I forgot that he says I don't get it in that video. That's pretty tough right there. But yeah, let's talk about printing money, what that means when you hear that phrase tossed around pretty frequently. That's not a literal term the way that you hear it used. Now, obviously, the government does literally print paper money. That is something they do. But when you're hearing this term thrown around, listening to the news or whatever, that's not what we're referring to. When we're talking about printing money, it's something kind of totally different.
Well, Jake, do at least talk about why would we be printing dollar bills? What let's cover that elementary fact first.
Sure. Obviously, paper bills go through the ringer. You know, as I started my career as a teller at a bank, and that was the first job that I have. And I'll just tell you guys, the condition of some of the currency that you see rolling in through the teller line at the bank is can be suspect at best. You know, there's a lot of times Monday mornings you get some suspicious wads of cash coming through the teller line at the bank. But even the normal course, obviously, of business, as the government's printed bills, you know, for decades at this point, physical money does have to be replaced. And so what you'll see banks do is take damaged or old bills. We actually ship them to the Federal Reserve. They're printing new bills and replacing those old bills with new bills to keep a certain level of currency, literal physical currency, in circulation. And really what they're trying to do is they've monitor, of course, how many denominations, you know, the quantity of each denomination that's out. There's a target that they're staying around, and that's
like how many $1 bills or
correct,
how many $5 bills or $20. Okay.
Yep. And so they are printing money. They're replacing old money as it's torn, destroyed. Obviously, there's some level of money that just is never seen or heard from again. And they of course they factor that into their models and how many bills they want to print. But when we're talking about printing money and adding money to the economy, that's not what it is. That's more of just maintaining a certain level of currency, physical currency in the economy for us to go get out of an ATM.
Well, explain to us when you hear an economist or a financier or a banker talk about printing money, and we're talking about the U.S. economy, and just like this very intelligent person we just watched, that quote printing money, what are we all talking about?
Yeah, and just real simply, it's injecting cash into injecting money into the economy. And so, if there was $100 in the economy before they print money, now there's $120. Of course, as most people probably are familiar with, when you get paid from your job, they're not giving you a wad of cash. They're, direct depositing some money in your checking account. And so, while there was obviously money that you received, that didn't come from physical cash. And so that's obviously a small scale example of what it is. But the way the government prints money, quote unquote, prints money is totally different. And so what we've got across all nations is everyone's got a central bank, right? For us, it's the U.S., it's the Federal Reserve. So when you hear the people talking about the central bank, we're talking about the Federal Reserve. They're the ones that enact our monetary policy. They're the ones making these decisions. And so I think probably part of what Jared Bernstein was not quite wrapping his brain around is the difference in the Federal Reserve Bank and the U.S. government, because they act intertwined, but they are separate entities. And I think that's maybe part of where he was not making a connection or describing effectively, obviously by any means. But the way the Federal Reserve, quote unquote, prints money or basically creates money and adds it to our economy, they do it through a few different ways, but it's typically all policy driven. Obviously the one we think of right now, most recently, as far as stimulus goes, is we passed a COVID relief bill, right? And everyone got, money just dropped in their account, where people getting obviously checks, whether it be monthly or annually or one time or whatever. That wasn't there had to be additional money put into the economy to go dump $1,200 in everybody's checking account. And so that is called, quote unquote, printing money. The other way they do that, the Federal Reserve, is they buy. When old Jared was talking about bonds, the Federal Reserve manages a balance sheet and a P&L just like every business, just like every other bank. And what they do is I'll give you guys a fancy term you can use. You've probably heard this, and maybe this will be informative as well. Through COVID, what you heard a lot was quantitative easing, right? You guys may have remember hearing that term very frequently during that time. Printing money is also what that is quantitative easing, which basically just means we're easing access to money, which of course that helps prop up the economy when people get access to money more easily and of course go spend it. And so one way they do that is buying, or really the primary way they did that back in COVID, for example, is buying T-bills, which is short for Treasury bills, that's issued by the government. And so the way the government got money to go give all that money away was by selling T-bills to the Federal Reserve. So the Federal Reserve bought billions and billions and billions of T-bills. And JT may have a slide to throw up to kind of show you guys the scale and the velocity at which those were purchased. So that graph on the top will just show you on the top is total assets on the balance sheet of the Fed. And so when we talk about balance sheet, that's all that is a financial report that shows here's the assets, here's the liabilities. What you're looking at here is assets. So you'll see massive increase in assets. And the main thing you'll notice, obviously, as we operate over a course of time, you're going to be used to seeing, that figure rise and fall, generally think of a stock market kind of ticker kind of going up and down, but you'll see the line that's almost vertical, straight up and down.
That's the Fed 2019, 2020
buying a whole bunch of stuff all at once. And so that's a shock to the system, right? If you bought those over 30 years, it wouldn't even be a blip on the radar. But you buy them in a month, and it's a massive shock to the economic system. And the graph on the bottom of that actually shows you what that's just T-bills on the balance sheet. So you see that went from 0 to hundreds of billions of dollars. Also, you're looking at the same velocity, just immediately purchasing hundreds of billions of dollars of T-bills. You know, the numbers we're talking about here are in hundreds of billions and trillions is what we're talking about on that top graph as far as assets on the Federal Reserve's balance sheet. And sometimes it's hard for people to wrap their mind around how much a trillion is, but you're talking about $3 trillion on a Fed balance sheet, and assets increase in an extremely short period of time. That is just such an incredible number that it's hard to even wrap your brain around. So
it went from about 3.5 to just over 7 in the pandemic. $1 trillion.
And so that's how much money that has been created / printed that has been put into the economy. So of course, what do we know about if you go throw all this extra money, these hundreds of billions and trillions of dollars, people spend it. And that was the point of it, right? It was to help us get through a difficult economic time because of the pandemic. You give people money so they'll spend it. And of course, when people spend money, that props the economy up. That's what helps stocks sell. That's what helps companies flourish. And so what that does, the result of that is inflation. And so when we're talking about inflation, and inflation's so high and inflation's so crazy, why is that the government's quote unquote fault, or really not? We wouldn't say fault. What's the government's role in that? Well, they're the ones that printed the money, put it in the market. People spent it and made prices go up, which prices going up equals inflation, right? Yeah. The other part of this too is banks are the ones that do that sell those T-bills. And so there's a transaction where, of course, the Federal Reserve buys it. Well, the bank is the one that holds all that cash. So all these banks have all this extra liquidity sitting on their balance sheet. And so what do banks do when they got a bunch of extra money? A bank makes a whole lot more yield or profit if they can go loan somebody some money rather than they just go park it in a checking account. And so the goal, the other part of that is that the government was wanting to do, and maybe rightfully so to some extent, not the extent that they did it, was for these banks have all this extra liquidity to go loan it, and which they did. And so you go reach a period where people are spending money, people are borrowing money, it's making prices go up, and it's making inflation go rampant. And so that's just a real quick kind of rundown on printing money, which is really just adding money to the economy. And I hope that's a kind of a decent way to describe the involvement of the Federal Reserve and the government and how all that stuff flushes through the system.
Well, Jake, let me ask you this question, because JT, did you have a question?
Well, no, I was just going to say this might be another topic of discussion, but these lines look a lot like the mail-in ballots in the 2020 election after the count was over. That's another topic for another day.
Yeah, there's probably some truth to that too.
Yeah, probably is. All right, well, Jake, here's my question. Those $1,200 checks that everybody got, was it real money?
It was real money because they spent it, but it was created out of thin air is what it is, which of course that's the only result of creating money basically to add to the economy is inflation. And of course, if you ask somebody, you know, at a root level, what's the biggest problem in our economy right now? It's inflation. And that's just a result of creating money to go throw in people's accounts.
Well, and you know, what happened to our national debt during that same time period?
Right. Yeah, I mean, you'd see a very similar bar graph, of course.
Yeah. Well, and that's just it. If the money's not real, I mean, yeah, it's spent, something spent. You know, you had something in your checking account. You did get a good, a value, or a service for that $1,200. But if it wasn't really real, where did the rubber ultimately hit the road? And I say it was in the fact that our national debt just skyrocketed overnight, just like
$4.2 trillion over that year.
Yep. Yeah, and the way, of course, the government does that is those treasury bills didn't exist before. They just created them. I mean, they created treasury bills, and then, you know, in this kind of pseudo arm's length transaction that's really not. The Federal Reserve bottom. So it's just creating hundreds of billions of dollars of T-bills and then basically having the Federal Reserve buy them. And so that's why you see the Federal Reserve, we can go basic accounting here, right? Debits and credits, they've got to equal, right? If the Federal Reserve balance sheet assets increase that dramatically, where's the liability entry for that? And of course, it's our government's debt.
And and like we said last time, the one nation on this globe that holds the largest segment of our debt is who?
Yeah, China. Yeah, and of course, and I'll say this too, and this is a good point, Keith, to bring me to. You saw the increase in the assets of the balance sheet on the Fed was in the trillions, and you saw the T-bills that was like, what was it, 500 billion, something like that. Where's the rest of that? Well, it wasn't just the U.S. Federal Reserve that bought those T-bills. It was China. It was Europe. It was all over the place.
It was Brazil. It was India.
We sold them to everywhere else as well. And so that essentially, makes them the debt holder for all of this money that we created out of thin air.
Well, and last time we talked about the fact that China has taken so much of not only our imbalance of trade, where China was buying practically nothing from us, we were buying everything from China. They were taking those profits, pouring them into their military, pouring them into their government coffers. Then China was using the economic power that we handed to them over a 40 or 50 year period of time. And they basically, let's just say, sprung onto the world stage in every imaginable part of the globe by them loaning money for infrastructure, for building this hydroelectric dam, rebuilding and refurbishing this international airport in another place, and constructing new port docks at a seaport. That's what China did with all the economic power we gave them. And because we won't say no to ourselves, or we won't send people to Washington to say no to our ever expanding government budget deficits, there's China, buying up all our debt, and they're going to be our mortgage holder one day. I mean, what are we going to do when they, when they call these notes? And Jake, if you don't mind, talk about that. What happens when that, let's say, a 20-year debt instrument? Yes, it's earning interest while it's in its term. But what happens when that debt instrument comes due? In other words, it matures at the end of 20 years. What happens to it?
Yeah, well, I'll just tell you what's historically happened to it is the government renews it and kicks the can down the road, which is why you continue to see the national debt continue to roll just out of control, because of course there's no feasible way that the U.S. government can go pay this stuff off, right? I mean, you can't even raise taxes enough to make a dent in what we're talking about here. And so, of course, rolling that stuff down the road and then compounding it with new debt is led to what you see as far as the trend in our national debt.
Playing devil's advocate, I've talked about this a lot on a personal level with people, but what do you do? We're in this spot now where if they don't extend the debt, people are gonna not get paychecks. Veterans aren't going to get paid. Active military is not going to get paid. It's just it's a tough question. I don't think anybody has one solution to right now because of just such a big mess. But what do we do in this situation? What can we do alternatively to not extend the debt?
Yeah, well, that's the reason you don't hear an answer to it is because there's not a good answer to it. I mean, there's not a pain-free answer. This is probably a good time, Keith, to talk about Social Security and that kind of stuff. If you want to kind of talk about kind of some thoughts you had around that, I think this is a natural progression into that, because JT led us right where you would have to start going. And what that looks like is painful.
Well, yeah, Jake, there was an article that came out today I saw. But before I jump onto that, I want to make one more point to you about what we've been talking about. A T-bill or any other debt instrument from the Treasury, when it matures, it's not as painful when it matures at 1.5%, 2%. But when you had a 2% debt instrument mature and it has to be covered by a new debt instrument at 6%, what does that do to our national debt?
Yeah, sure. But yeah, obviously exponentially compounds it. And of course, now we talked about quantitative easing earlier, and so what the government's now trying to do, and you probably start hearing this more and more right now and going forward, is quantitative tightening, right? Which of course is just the opposite. And so what they need to do is start buying back some of those all these T-bills that they've issued, but of course, with what money? And so, as they still try to navigate what's being referred to as a soft landing, as you hear that term thrown around all over the place right now, of course, just means, hey, we're going to bring everything back to where it needs to be without there being any significant repercussions from what we've done for the last 4 years, and which is just looking more and more difficult for them to execute. And that's the main reason why they can't go take all these these T-bills that they've created and sold and buy them back at the same rate, of course. And so it's a tough spot. There's just no. I wish I had a better answer for you, but it's just one of those things right now. This is why I don't think much has happened. Is everyone's going, I don't know what to do.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and Jake, here, let's be real. We cannot run a government on sound bites, but that's what you get. CNN, Fox, MSNBC, CNBC, when they have politicians on that they're trying to interview and the subject is economics, government spending, good fiscal policy, all you get are sound bites that cover a minuscule segment of the overall picture of the problems. Do you agree with that?
Nobody gives you the full picture anymore. It's just let's feed you little bits of information to get you, thinking about something, but we're never going to give you the full picture.
Yeah, and so let's talk about. I mean, that's the point. Is the people, and I don't want to be too pessimistic, but our leadership in Washington that's exactly what they do. And the reason, this is a perfect example of this. You ask, well, what should we have done, right? Instead of doing what we did, what should we have done? And the answer is there was some level of stimulus I would say, it was definitely appropriate, right? Now, we did it about 100x more than we should, but the reason that they did it at the level they did is because everybody wanted to get reelected in 2020, which is, it doesn't matter what year it is or what's going on. That's all those guys care about in Washington is getting reelected. They wanted to come through that time and give good sound bites like, look at the economy. Look, you guys got money. Look, the economy's still strong. You're still hearing that today. Look how strong the economy is. And everyone's going, what are we talking about? But what we did by flushing all that so quickly with that velocity, even at the time, anybody that knows what was happening is going, this is the dumbest thing we could do. It was a short-term game, extremely short-term game. All it did was punt down the road what we're going to have to deal with for extreme long-term consequences. So it was like, hey, yeah, for a few months there, we can talk about how good the economy's doing. Well, meanwhile, every month that we do this, it's going to cost us a decade to pull out of it. But it was just selfish people in Washington making decisions to cover their own butts, in my opinion.
Here's your good question. Why is the annual interest owed versus GDP? This is from one of our viewers on Facebook.
Yeah, I'd have to look it up. I don't think you probably want to know what percentage of the annual interest that we owe is versus GDP, because it's going to be the spread there is not going to be nearly as wide as you'd like it to be, no doubt.
Well, and for our viewers and listeners at home, basically it's a matter of if you want to take out a mortgage, well, what does the mortgage company want to know about you? They want to know how much money you make. They want to know what your expenses are, how much you're spending on groceries, how much you're spending on automobiles, what your credit card debt is. And why is that, Jake? What are they trying to measure? They want a certain distance between your ability to generate income and the monthly payment you're about to try to strap on.
Yep.
And they want that to be wide enough. And I think that's what our questioner was made.
Yeah.
The point he was making was the annual interest that we have to now pay because of the effects of inflation. Not only have we exploded the debt, but we've exploded it and having to pay higher interest rates just to service the debt. So what has that done compared to our ability to generate tax revenue to cover it? And that's to me a similar measurement, and that's why the question was asked. How does the interest debt load compared to our GDP? In other words, is our economy growing enough that it can actually afford the debt?
Yeah, and of course the answer is definitely not. And that's a great analogy, Keith, because that is that is the primary driver for a mortgage is, and what you're describing is debt to income, DTI. So everybody that goes and gets a mortgage, they're going to get a number that's spit out. They're going to tally your monthly payments, right? Tally your monthly income. They get a debt to income ratio. What they're looking for a mortgage is 44% or less. And of course, what we're talking about on the global scale or the national scale, I guess I should say, is just the interest. Of course, whenever the mortgage company's calculating that, they're not asking you, hey, what's the interest on your car loan and what's the interest on your mortgage payment? They're asking what's the actual payment, right? Because as a person, as a citizen, you have principal and interest that you're paying. You're paying principal as well as interest. And so if your interest carry is already outside of that normal threshold or range for, a quote unquote debt to income, what does that mean? When do you knock down the principal, which is really the core of the question we're asking? How do we ever knock down any principal on this thing when we're spending money, obviously accruing interest at such a rate that we can't even grow our economy quickly enough? And of course, what happens when and if the economy retracts? And I'll just tell you, if you got their policymakers on truth serum, they don't care about ever reducing the principal or national debt, and I don't think that they will. I mean, I don't, and it's at least if they had their own way, they would just let this thing run forever until something really breaks. And I don't think we want to get into that doomsday scenario today, but it's a slippery slope for sure.
Well, Jake, you got to admit, the full faith and credit of the U.S. government is what has allowed foreigners, when the world has economic turmoil, where does their money go? It goes into our stock market, and it goes into our government debt instruments. That's because they still see us as the strongest economy in the world, the safest economy in the world. My concern is we have been stupid for so long, to such a degree, that what is going to happen, Jake, when what you just said comes true and it becomes obvious to people around the globe that our government, financial, fiscal leaders have no intention of ever resolving the debt problems. What's the pattern? It just keeps growing and keeps growing and keeps growing. Well, what happens when the rest of the world looks at what has been happening over time and they're going, they truly aren't going to ever deal with this, are they?
Yeah.
The ability of foreign assets to keep coming into this government that, let's call it, salves our wounds, that's going to dry up too.
Yeah, there's no doubt. I mean, what you're describing is how America would lose its status as the preeminent world power for sure, which, we talked, I think at length about last time we got to have this conversation. That would be the goal of other nations, specifically China, is to overtake us for that distinction. And so
Yeah.
that's certainly, that's what happens. Yeah. If nothing changes and that we continue on that path for sure.
Well, let's go ahead and jump on that Social Security issue. The article that I brought to everybody's attention, here was the headline: Social Security fears go viral. Should you claim early like Dave Ramsey says? I like Dave Ramsey. I think is a very smart man. I don't agree with him on everything, but that's who Dave Ramsey is. All right. According to the Associated Press, Social Security will be unable to pay full benefits to recipients starting in 2035. Guys, that's only 11 years from now.
I won't see it.
Well, Jake, something's got to give.
That's the exact. I saw a different article recently, Keith, and I saw the exact same year, 2035. That's exactly when, if nothing changes on that, we're all of a sudden we're in a world of hurt there. And so what are they going to do? There's really the primary way, of course, that Social Security is funded is based on people working and paying Social Security tax, right? And so,
yeah, Jake, let me interrupt you just a second. People need to understand that what you're paying in Social Security is not going into an account to grow for you to draw against one day.
Yeah.
What you're paying, what you, Jake, are paying, and what JT is paying in Social Security right now is funding my check.
Yep.
And if you ask 100 people in America, if that's true, they would say they don't know. But that is the truth. The check I get for Social Security, you and JT are paying for it.
Yeah, that's right. And same with Medicare, Medicaid, all that stuff too, of course. And so that's a good point to bring to attention for sure, Keith. It's not like there's a savings account with my name on it that's sitting there waiting for me. It's which describes the issue, right? Is you got people currently working that are paying for people currently retired, and we're coming up on a breaking point where the amount that's being paid in is not going to be enough to cover the amount that is being drawn out. And there's a few reasons for that. One, people are living longer. Keith's has data on how precipitously birth rates have declined. Obviously, inflation is part of that because Social Security checks are adjusted for inflation to some extent. And so those people that are drawing money, their checks typically increase. What I saw, Keith, in 2035, one of the options they had was to cut Social Security benefits by 17%. Well, you got a bunch of people living on Social Security fixed income. That's their only source of income. I mean, I don't know about you guys. Somebody told me tomorrow they're going to cut my check by 17%. I'd have to change some things. And so, reallocate the way I live my life and my resources accordingly. And so what if you do that to millions and millions of people that are sitting on a fixed income? A lot of them, they're barely, what they're getting now is about all the bare minimum they can do. And so, cutting Social Security benefits by 17% sure seems tough. And I dare somebody to go run on that platform and try to get elected. And so what's the other option, of course, is to increase taxes for the people working to try to increase the money that's being paid in. Well, here we are in a time of unprecedented inflation, and then you're going to start taking more tax dollars out of people's paychecks that are already struggling to make ends meet because what it costs to buy goods and services has gone up substantially. And then you're going to start taking more money out of their checks. That's a tough ask as well. And of course, who's going to go run on that platform and try to get elected as well? But at some point, we got to have somebody that's going to go fix this thing. And once again, some of what we talked about earlier, there's not many options that don't involve quite a bit of probably weeping and gnashing of teeth by lots of people to get us back to a place of bouncing, which is why you continue to see nothing happen.
Yeah. Well, Jake, I've got 2 points. Y'all try to help me remember. I got 2 points I want to make. One is the report of, and this is what kills me. Wages have increased. That's good. The economy was tightened enough that, wages went up some, but almost to a person. All the polls show that the rate of inflation has far exceeded the rate of wage growth.
Oh yeah.
So it's like you said, and you're going to, inflation is killing me. I take my same $150 to the grocery store this week, and I walk out with fewer groceries. I mean, there are people. I wish I had that article, but I just read the article this evening. Talked about there are people who they've maxed out their credit cards, they've drained their savings. Excuse me, and they are literally going home from the grocery store, and they do not have enough food to last them till their next paycheck. And we're talking about working people. We're talking about working, not people on fixed income, working people. Yeah, they might have got a little bit of raise based on all the well, that's what the administration wants to go all over the country talking about. Well, look what we've done. Wages are up. Yeah, but look what you did on the inflation front. Mm-hmm. Groceries are up 20-something% in 3 years. That's what's killing people. So,
yeah, there's no doubt, and the data just doesn't lie.
How are you going to tell that working person that, okay, I've already got you squeezed, you're already missing, 1 or 2 meals a week. I'm going to need to raise your taxes because I can't even conceive of trying to run for re-election and let something happen to Social Security.
Yeah. And of course, the root of all this problem, obviously the best route to go, if someone wants to avoid both of those options that are extremely difficult to stomach, is for the government to just spend less money on other stuff, right? I mean, there's no doubt that this government spending is just asinine and out of control. And so they make Social Security like, well, what are we going to do? I mean, there's only so much coming in. It's like, well, what about you guys quit wasting a few $1 trillion over here? And then all of a sudden, look, what if we just used a little bit of that money to help supplement this? But it's like, it's just not, there's not a conversation that had in Washington just use some logic, right? That is an option, is, hey, why don't we cut some expenses elsewhere instead of saying, well, we've either got to tax people more or we got to cut benefits for people in government. There's another lever to pull, and it's spend less money elsewhere and use that money for those programs. But they act like, well, nothing we do about Social Security unless we tax you more or we cut benefits. And it's like they present it like that's the only two options, when in reality it's not.
And all it is to scare you into not voting for the party on the other side. That's all it is. All right, Jake, let's speak in terms of a more global view of things. What about the libertarian that says government never should have been in this business anyway? They never should have been in the qualitative easing business. They should have never been trying to fix, the economy. Let the market work, and the market will straighten itself out.
Well, and yeah, I definitely think in the market I think that's a great way to make sure people are making prudent decisions, right? If you want to go back to the housing crisis, the reason that happened was a bunch of financial institutions just making stupid decisions, and of course they saw no retribution cast upon them other than a couple sacrificial lambs coming out the end of that thing. I mean, nobody went to jail over any of that stuff, and then basically they got bailed out by the government, which of course, how the government do that, they quote unquote printed money, right? And bailed people out of that. And so I definitely think the free market works for them. The problem is our government doesn't operate. Even in that scenario, the government doesn't operate that way. And we can't let the government fail. And they kind of operate with impunity. I think that's why they have, the kind of the laissez-faire attitude toward the national debts. Like, what's going to happen? We're going to go out of business? No, I mean, that's not going to happen. So, well, they don't see any real consequences for their actions, even though we've described quite a few of the consequences of their actions.
We print money, and then well, I don't know, but we print money. I've got a unlimited check. We print money.
Yeah.
Well, I just love that. I just love that video. Jake, my thing is the government should never be in the business of picking winners and losers. They did it in the auto industry. They've done it in renewable resources. when Obama first came into office, him and his energy secretary, they both went around the country talking about we need $8 a gallon gasoline. Why?
Mm-hmm.
The
I think
only
they're
reason
smarter
they
than the free
needed
market.
do what?
I think they're smarter than the free market, which of course is just there's no way for that to be true.
Well, that's just it. There's no free lunch.
Yeah.
I mean, we've had, all these thousands of years of civilization, and the one thing anybody who's got an IQ of 50 or higher knows there's no free lunch. Yet our government repeatedly keeps trying to prove us, prove the opposite of that.
Yeah.
And this making everybody go electric. Well, I hate to tell you, West Texas is not going to be receptive to electric vehicles.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, can you imagine trying to run from here to Palo Duro Canyon for a nice weekend in the campground, and you get down in there? By the time you get there, your electric vehicle has no battery left.
Yeah.
No, it's insane. Now, urban areas, Europe has proven that in limited, very, very, very limited ways, in heavily built up urban areas, nice little runaround. But that's not what the American economy is going to flourish on.
I've seen arguments on social media with people from like California. And California has rolling blackouts because they shut down 2 more coal plants not too long ago, and they're pushing for full electric vehicles in California and cities in California that literally have blackouts. People can't stay cool in their houses. They don't want people running their air conditioners. What's that going to do to the grid when it goes all electric? The craziest part of that conversation is they didn't understand that their electricity comes from coal and fossil fuel. And, they wanted to argue on there, we need to do this so that, our AC doesn't run on gas or fossil fuel. I said, yeah, but your electricity does.
Yeah. Well, and you talk about, people not liking coal or gas. You guys do, would you get a chance, or anybody listening, you want to go Google what's happening in lithium mines right now. That's the worst human rights violations and environmental negative impacts you can find in any industry is lithium mining for batteries for electric vehicles. And of course, the other point I'm going to make on that is, of course, how does the government want to incentivize people to go electric? It's tax credits, right? Which is in a roundabout way, once again, printing money. It's like, hey, you guys go do what we want you to do, and you'll pay less taxes, which is less income that's coming to the government. And so it's, that whole thing makes zero sense at all.
Well, that goes back to my point that if you have any doubt at all, I think we're better off to lean toward let the free market enterprise system work. It'll correct itself. It may be painful, but a little bit of pain now is not going to be near what the pain's going to be, because we've created a false system, and we've kept that false system, fake system, propped up.
Yeah, no doubt. And that's the thing, Keith. For me, there needs to be winners and losers, right? And I can stomach a loss if, hey, I just made I made some missteps, I made some bad decisions, and I was negatively impacted. I expect that to happen, right? I don't expect somebody to come bail me out. Well, you made a bunch of bad decisions. That's the reason you're facing this challenge. But I don't expect someone to say, well, here, sorry that happened to you. Here's some money. Why don't we bail you out? I mean, there should be winners and losers, right? And that's a good incentive for people to try to make prudent decisions, managing money or whatever it is, hey, there's consequences if I mess this up, right?
But the market creates the winners and losers.
That's right. That's what I mean. The government needs to let that happen.
Right. When the government picks winners and losers, they're creating a false system.
Yeah, totally agree. They're not letting the winners and losers actually come to fruition because they're stepping in a place where they shouldn't be involved.
Right. Well, let me tell you, there's a Glenn Reynolds is a law professor at the University of Tennessee. I read him faithfully. Very, very smart guy, and he has a very simple mantra, and that is anything that can't go on forever won't. I mean, boy, that's simple, but it is so true. And having brought that up, we covered the Social Security thing, we covered the housing thing. All right, let's do this. Let's go to something that's really concerning me. And here's the title: Dramatic Declines in Global Fertility Rates Set to Transform Global Population Patterns by 2100. I'm going to read you some statistics, Jake. By 2050, over 3/4 of the global countries will not have high enough fertility rates to sustain population size over time. By the year 2100, that will be 97% of the countries on the face of the earth will not be replacing living people. In other words, people will be dying faster than they're replacing them. All right. Now, you heard the statistics I gave you, right?
Yep. Yes,
How's
sir.
the government going to tax
Right.
the younger and younger generations who are going to be fewer and fewer and fewer while our government budget continues to expand in some cases it's not literally exponentially, but boy, it sure seems like it.
Yeah, and of course this will go right back to the Social Security discussion. Right, we're already about to cross a threshold of not enough Social Security money coming in for what's going out. That gap is only going to widen. So we talk about we hit an important point in time in 2035. What does that look like in 2070? When some of that stuff that you just described has come to fruition. The only answer that you'll be told is we're gonna have to start taxing everybody 60%. And of course you hear about crazy taxes, death taxes and estate taxes and things like that are just at crazy levels. I mean, the way the government likes to try to fix that is just tax people. It's like, well, if we don't tax you more, then we can't provide for all these elderly people, which once again, I would say we got to spend less money somewhere else. But unfortunately, we haven't seen the government be willing to address that problem yet. But yeah, that's a serious issue. I mean, that's just describing a widening gap from our earlier conversation about who's paying taxes and who's receiving benefits.
Well, and you can go into detail and you can study the effects of World War II, where you had 5 years of practically no births. Okay. And then you had millions of soldiers coming back from overseas. And, you had factory workers, some men, but huge numbers of women who had some pretty nice bank accounts because, working 80 hours a week, they had the amount of money in savings at the end of World War II. People were pretty surprised. So you have, millions of soldiers coming back from overseas. You've got the pent up lack of marriages and births and things like that. And so what you had was, from the end of World War II in 1945 to let's say 1960, you had what everybody knows as the baby boomer generation. That's where we came from. Our mamas and daddies came out of World War II and they had tons of kids. Well, that's the baby boomer generation. Then you had a time the next generation was not quite so big. And then you had a mini baby boomers when we started having kids. Okay. But what about the last 3 generations after that? Every generation was fewer and fewer and fewer. And now you got people that aren't even talking about going to be getting married, not even going to have kids. And, China had for so long, China had the one child limit per family. And now China is suffering the same fate. And that is they do not even have enough workers to fill their factories now, because they've had such a low birth rate for so long in China. And that graph, the one you showed before that, JT, that's where it's headed. And here's baby boomers, and like you said, Jake, people are living longer. So according to how the benefits are set in stone and by statute, there's fewer and fewer people having to fund those expanding level of benefits. Well, what's going to happen when everybody decides, look, when I got out of college and started working, there were 40 of us that were supporting everything. Now there's 20 of us. In 10 years, it's going to be 12 of us. At what point do we say it's unsustainable?
Yeah, I mean, we're at the unsustainable point already. It's just a matter of when we decide to do something about it, for sure. And yeah, it's just it's gonna have to be painful. We're gonna have to do something. But we're just describing the typical MO for the government is that they'll fix it. Put a little Band-Aid on a bullet wound and kick the can down the road and we'll let somebody else deal with that. We'll let somebody else do that with that 10 years down the road. Well, at some point, somebody's going to have to deal with it because we can only kick that. What was your saying you said earlier, Keith? If something's not sustainable,
anything that can't go on forever won't.
That's right. Well, that's an incredibly apt saying for our conversation right now. At some point, somebody's going to have to do something. Of course, the longer you wait, the worse it is, right?
Yeah. Well, here's something else, Jake. When you hear a politician bragging to his constituents, I cut spending, I voted for that bill, we cut spending on so-and-so, so-and-so. No, you didn't. It would have increased by 10%, and you only let it increase by 9.9%. It still increased. You didn't cut spending. You simply cut the rate at which it was continuing to grow in spending.
Mm-hmm.
Well, how many times have you seen that when you hear the politician saying, I cut spending? He's lying through his teeth. He didn't cut spending.
Yeah.
Isn't that the ultimate problem?
Yeah. And which is funny you say that. That's the same way that they're trying to sell inflation data to us now, right? Inflation's coming down. It's like, well, it's coming, instead of inflation being at 12%, now it's at 9%. It's like, well, 9% is not good either, right? But the other thing I'll say about the cutting spending thing that you hear spun to us, you're absolutely right what you said. Another scenario that happens all the time is, hey, we cut spending on this. And so I passed this bill and we cut spending on this thing in this bill. Well, in that bill, there was an increase in spending that was quadruple what they cut in this one thing on these other things. They didn't cut spending, they reallocated money to something else and increased the funding for that. So they'll be toting how we cut spending in this bill on this, and the way they'll say that is we cut spending on this. Well, I don't know what it is, agriculture. But they passed this farm bill where there was less spending on government payments in agriculture, but there was this massive increase in food stamp spending, right, or whatever it is. And so you didn't cut. You tell me you cut spending in this, but in the very bill that you're talking about where you cut spending, there's actually a net increase in spending.
Oh yeah.
Well, and they do it, and they have these special sessions where they come in and they say we got to vote to extend the debt ceiling, and they come in and somebody comes up with a 1,200-page bill, and it's like, okay, why do you need a 1,200-page bill to increase the debt ceiling? What else is in there? And there was all kinds of stuff in the COVID relief fund.
Know what's in it. Remember that?
Oh yeah. That's what they say now. You got to pass it, know what's in it. But in the pandemic relief bill, I mean, they had funding for art institutes. They had funding for all kinds of different institutions that you're like, what did that have to do with saving the American people? We've got a big push right now, and this is probably a big contributing factor to why our fertility rate is so low right now. Is everyone's pushing for rights for abortions, and everyone's pushing for we need to allow this as health care, and you don't realize it, but I understand there are extenuating circumstances that need to happen sometimes, and we can get it. That's a whole nother rabbit hole to get down, but we're not helping ourselves by vilifying and raising the issue that we we need to make abortion healthcare. We're extremely hurting ourselves by not having children right now.
I agree with JT.
No doubt.
Well, Jake, we're about out of time, and I want to thank you for. Oh, let's see. Is the economy the main influence on the birth rates? What about COVID immunizations? Oh my gosh, that is a whole nother subject. Goodness. Yeah, we could talk about that. We could talk about the drain on resources for borders that no longer exist. There's a lot. But here's what I'm going to say. I think to wrap it up. Number one, Jake, I think you, with your participation tonight, we did a much better job of explaining, covering, showing more detail. A lot of what we talked about last time. So thank you for that. But here's what I'm going to say, and we'll let you take us out tonight. We have to have the resolve to get politicians to go to Washington who have the ability to say no. No, I'm not going to vote for X. I'm not going to vote for Y. I'm not going to fund A. I'm not going to fund B. We can't afford it. And all those that are fiscally conservative, boy, they catch hell in the media. Jake?
Yeah, I mean, I think what I'd say too, and what I like to do when I think about all of these things, and where we've talked a lot about where we see issues or things that could be improved, is how can I apply that to myself personally, right? And what I encourage, what I want to work on for me and encourage other people to do is just what you said, Keith. Sometimes you got to do the hard things, right, and things that you don't want to do. But that doesn't change the fact that sometimes it's a necessity, right? And so, not to shy away from the challenges, not to look the other way, bury your head in the sand, or try to make it someone else's issue, but just face things head on, do difficult things. I got to talk a little about my faith last time, but we're called to, or I feel like I'm called to a different standard, and a lot of times that's counterintuitive to what you'll hear in a worldly perspective, and so it's just an encouragement to me, and really a call to me to be someone that will stand up and do the right thing, say the right thing, and do the hard things.
Well, Jake,
do things nobody else wants to do.
Well, exactly, and I think part of why I like covering this topic is because so many young people. I mean, I've got nieces, nephews, kids, grandkids. I have no idea. Do they realize the seriousness of? I mean, they're on the paycheck treadmill. That's what I would describe it as. They're on the paycheck treadmill. They don't have time to study these topics. They don't have time to do the digging that me and you and JT. I mean, it's just in our nature to care about things like this. It's in our nature to try to see where problems lie and try to right wrongs. And that is one of the things that Micah 6:6-8 says. He says, "I have shown you, O man, what is good. Do justice, love mercy, and walk humbly with your God." Do justice, love mercy, and walk humbly with your God. All right. Well, we care. We want fairness. We want people to be treated right. We want people to have equal opportunities. Now, what they do with it's up to them, but we don't want to see people suffer. And Jake, that's why I'm so glad to have you on. That's why I'm so glad to have us covering these topics to help expose these issues to people who think or in some cases may actually want to make the excuse, well, I'm too busy. I'm too busy. Well, you're going to be so busy that, you're going to need to load your kids up, and you're going to think you're going to want to take them to the soccer field. But guess what? There's no gas in your vehicle. your vehicle won't run. You can't get it repaired because you ran out of money. Why did you run out of money? Because you're being taxed to death. We don't want people to reach that point before they've started understanding it's never too late. But the choices and results are going to be way harder, and the pain is going to be way greater the longer we wait to start making the tough choices. So, Jake, finish us out, buddy.
Oh, I just think we need an invitation song after that one, Keith. I love it, guys. I appreciate you having me on again and letting me once again. I hope I was just an effective sounding board to let you guys send some wisdom out in the world. And thanks, guys, for having me back again tonight. Really enjoyed it.
Well, Jake, we appreciate you. And like I said, I feel a lot better. I think we did a lot better job of explaining things and not having it quite so where we would gloss over something and move on. And so I think we did a lot better job of that tonight. So I want to appreciate you. I appreciate you for your time. And JT, you've always done a great job being the co-pilot. So guys, I think that'll do us for tonight.
Well, those listening at home, don't forget, we're on YouTube, Twitch, we're on Twitter, we're on Facebook. Please like, share, subscribe, send this out to your friends, your family, your moms, brothers, sisters, cousins, aunts, uncles, and your doctor and your dentist. We want to get the word out. We want everybody to understand we're here to entertain, but also inform. So we love each and every one of you. Jake, again, man, appreciate you jumping in for us last minute. We always love having you on, and I know there's plenty more we could talk about, but I know we probably need to give you a little break. You've been hard at work for us. So thanks again, guys. This was a odd cast because we were normally doing Thursdays and we had to do a one for Wednesday night for some conflicts. So again, just appreciate everybody and appreciate the conversation.
Yes, indeed.
Thanks, guys.
All right, good night. Good night, everybody.
Good night.